Salmon is one of the most purchased fish in the United States. Millions of Americans eat it every week, recommended by doctors, praised by nutritionists, endorsed by every clean-eating influencer on the internet. It's the fish that became a symbol of eating well, of making the right choice. But here's the thing nobody is telling you at the grocery store. The fish on your plate is not what you think it is. Its color, that beautiful, rich, orange-pink hue that makes you reach for it, didn't come from nature. Its story, the one on the packaging, is carefully constructed marketing. And the farm it came from? It's one of the most controversial systems in modern food production. Today we're pulling back the curtain on salmon, not to make you panic, but because you deserve to know exactly what you're eating. Let's start with the color, because if you knew what was really happening there, you might look at that fish very differently. Wild salmon, the kind that fights its way upstream through rivers, that lives in the open ocean, gets its orange-red color from eating krill and other tiny crustaceans. Those crustaceans contain astaxanthin, a natural pigment. It accumulates in the salmon's flesh over years of feeding in the wild. The color is earned. Farmed salmon does not eat krill. It eats a manufactured feed made primarily of fish meal, soy protein, and vegetable oils. Left to its own devices, the flesh of farmed Atlantic salmon is a pale grayish pink, almost colorless by comparison. And consumer research confirmed something the industry already suspected. When test groups were shown undyed farmed salmon, most people said they would not buy it. The color signaled freshness, quality, nutrition. So the industry found a solution. Synthetic astaxanthin, manufactured by chemical companies like DSM and BASF, is added directly to the salmon's feed. The fish absorb it, and their flesh turns pink. Farmers actually use a tool called the Salmon fan, a color-matching chart, not unlike what you'd find at a paint store, to select precisely how orange they want their salmon to be. They are, in the most literal sense, choosing your food's color the way an interior designer picks a wall shade. Now, to be clear, synthetic astaxanthin is generally considered safe for human consumption by regulatory agencies, including the FDA. But here's what the label doesn't tell you. That color, the one that made you choose this fish over the other, came from a lab, added strategically to make the product look more appealing. If they didn't dye it, most people simply wouldn't buy it. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's documented consumer science. Most of the salmon sold in American grocery stores, at Costco, at Walmart, at your local supermarket, comes from large-scale aquaculture operations, primarily in Norway and Chile. And the scale of those operations is difficult to fully grasp. Imagine a floating net pen roughly the size of a football field. Now fill it with 50,000 to 90,000 individual fish. These are Atlantic salmon, a species that in the wild would roam hundreds of miles of open ocean. In a farm pen, each fish has roughly the equivalent of a bathtub's worth of space. At that density, disease spreads easily. One of the most documented problems is sea lice, Lepiophthirus simonis, parasitic copepods that attach to fish, feed on their skin, blood, and mucus, and in severe infestations, eat down to the skull. They are naturally present in ocean environments, but the concentration of fish in farm pens creates ideal conditions for lice populations to explode. The Norwegian government tracks sea lice levels across its aquaculture industry and has set regulatory limits. In years with significant infestations, some farms have had to remove fish early, use medical treatments, or apply pesticide-based bath treatments to reduce parasite loads. Chile, which produces much of the salmon sold in North America, has faced repeated crises. In 2007, an outbreak of infectious salmon anemia, a viral disease, devastated the Chilean industry, killing tens of millions of fish and requiring massive antibiotic intervention. Chilean salmon farms used more antibiotics per ton of fish than virtually any other major aquaculture producer in the world during that period. The antibiotic situation has improved since, partly due to pressure from buyers and regulators, but the structural challenge remains. Packing that many animals into a small space creates disease pressure that requires active management. And because these are open net pens in the ocean, that management doesn't stay contained. Waste, uneaten feed, chemical treatments, and escaped fish all flow directly into surrounding waters. Escaped farmed salmon can interbreed with wild populations, diluting the genetic diversity that helps wild fish survive and adapt. This is the place your salmon came from. It's not a farm in any pastoral sense. It's an industrial system operating at sea. Here's where things get genuinely complicated. Because farmed salmon is not simply bad for you, the truth is more nuanced than that. And the nuance matters. Farmed Atlantic salmon is, in absolute terms, high in omega-3 fatty acids, often higher in total omega-3 content than wild salmon, actually, because farmed fish are fattier overall. Studies published in nutrition journals have confirmed this, so the basic claim that salmon is a good source of omega-3s holds up even for farmed varieties. But here's what changes when you look closer. Farmed salmon is significantly higher in total fat, including saturated fat, than wild. And the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids, which is a key marker in nutrition research, is less favorable in farmed fish. This is a direct consequence of the high soy, high vegetable oil feed they're given. Then there's the contaminant question. A widely cited 2004 study published in the journal Science analyzed 700 salmon samples from around the world and found that farmed salmon contained significantly higher concentrations of PCBs, dioxins, and other persistent organic pollutants than wild salmon. The researchers concluded that based on these findings, farmed salmon should be eaten no more than once a month for some risk groups. That study was controversial. The salmon farming industry disputed its methodology. Follow-up research gave more mixed results, and overall contaminant levels in farmed fish have declined as feed formulations have improved. The FDA has not restricted farmed salmon consumption, but what the scientific debate reveals is something important. We still don't have perfect clarity on the long-term effects of eating farmed salmon regularly. The fish that's been positioned as a straightforward health food exists inside a genuinely complex nutritional and toxicological landscape, and that complexity is almost never communicated to the person standing at the seafood counter. Let's talk about what's written on the label and what isn't. In the United States, the FDA requires that farm-raised fish be labeled as such, so that part is technically disclosed. But walk through a grocery store and pay attention to how that disclosure is made. Farm-raised in small text beneath the price, or buried in the fine print below a large banner that says, Atlantic salmon, fresh catch. The coloring is also technically disclosed, required by law. But look for it. You'll typically find color added in small print, often near the nutrition facts, rarely prominent. Compare that to the large, vivid photography of the fish itself, that deep, saturated orange that covers most of the package. And then there are the terms that sound meaningful but aren't legally defined. Ocean-raised sounds like the fish lived freely in open water. In reality, ocean-raised Atlantic salmon are raised in net pens anchored in the ocean. It's technically accurate and completely misleading at the same time. The country of origin labeling rules, once robust enough that you could trace your salmon to Norway or Chile, were significantly weakened for many seafood products sold in the U.S. market. Depending on how the fish is processed and packaged, the trail can become difficult to follow. The information is technically available, but it is not designed to be found. There is a difference between disclosure and transparency, and the salmon industry has mastered that distinction. The obvious question at this point is, just buy wild-caught salmon. Problem solved. And the answer is yes, with caveats. True wild-caught Pacific salmon, sockeye, coho, king, pink, is genuinely different. It's not colored artificially. It's leaner with a different fat profile. It comes from fisheries that, in places like Alaska, are among the best managed in the world. The Marine Stewardship Council certifies many Alaskan salmon fisheries as sustainable, but wild-caught comes with its own complications. First, the price. Wild Pacific salmon can cost 2 to 4 times as much as farmed Atlantic. For many families, that's simply not practical. Second, the fraud problem. Studies using DNA testing, including investigations by Oceana, the Ocean Conservation Organization, have found that salmon labeled as wild-caught is sometimes actually farmed. In one study, around 43% of salmon samples labeled as wild-caught were found to be mislabeled. Restaurants are worse offenders than grocery stores, but the problem exists across the supply chain. Third, seasonality. Fresh wild Pacific salmon has a limited season, roughly May through September. Wild salmon sold outside that window is almost always previously frozen, which is fine nutritionally, but matters if you're paying premium prices expecting fresh-off-the-boat fish. The wild alternative is real and generally better, but it requires navigation, verification, and often a significantly higher grocery bill. Here's a piece of history that puts all of this in context. In the 1980s, Norway had a problem. Its salmon farming industry was producing far more Atlantic salmon than domestic consumers could absorb. They needed a new market, so they looked at Japan, the world's largest seafood-consuming nation. There was just one obstacle. The Japanese didn't eat raw Atlantic salmon. Japanese culinary tradition had always used Pacific salmon species for sashimi, and Atlantic salmon was considered too fatty and too prone to parasites to eat raw. Norwegian industry representatives spent years negotiating, sampling, and marketing their product to Japanese distributors and chefs. By the 1990s, salmon sushi and sashimi had become enormously popular in Japan. Today, it's one of the most ordered items at sushi restaurants globally. What we think of as a traditional Japanese food tradition is, in many ways, a successful Norwegian export campaign. This isn't an accusation. It's a reminder that the foods we consider natural, obvious, or time-honored are often the result of deliberate economic and marketing decisions made by industries looking to expand. Our perception of salmon as the healthy choice, the sophisticated choice, the responsible choice was built carefully, systematically, over decades. Understanding that doesn't mean the product is worthless. It means you deserve to be an informed participant in that story, not just a passive consumer of it. So what does this all actually mean for you? First, some practical guidance. If you want to buy wild salmon, look specifically for Alaskan sockeye, coho, or pink salmon. Check that it's Marine Stewardship Council certified. If you're buying it fresh, ask when it came in and where it's from. If you're buying it frozen, that's often actually better. Flash frozen at sea preserves quality. If you're buying farmed salmon, which is perfectly reasonable, especially on a budget, look for certifications from the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, which sets standards for more responsible farming practices. Norwegian farmed salmon generally has lower antibiotic use than Chilean. These distinctions exist, and they matter. Second, a broader shift in how you read labels. The terms natural, fresh, and ocean-raised have no fixed legal definition in U.S. food labeling. They are marketing language. The actual information is in the fine print: species, name, origin, and whether color was added. Train yourself to find those three things. Third, and this is the most important one, stop letting the food industry make health decisions for you by default. Ask the question before you buy, not after. Salmon is not poison. Eating it won't hurt you. But the version of salmon that most Americans eat, its color engineered, its origins obscured, its health halo carefully maintained by decades of marketing, is not the simple, clean food it's sold as. Every time you pay a premium for something because you believe it's better for you, you deserve to know whether that belief is based on evidence or on a label someone designed to make you feel that way. If this video changed how you'll look at the fish counter, hit the like button. It helps more people find this kind of content. And drop a comment. Were you already suspicious, or did something here genuinely surprise you? I read every single one.